Today I would like to share a theoretical model based on my doctoral dissertation work, and I hope this model inspires some teachers and researchers in their pursuit of social justice for all. Let's see. In the beginning, and I have always been interested in social justice and peace education in a country such as Colombia that has been violent for almost 60 years. So I always wonder what is the English language education field doing to this respect? And with that in mind, I decided to conduct this research. But in order to understand who I am and where I'm coming from, I have to go back to my stance, who I am, where I'm coming from, and everything that is necessary for me to understand why is it that I'm doing this. My philosophy of life, my worldview, the ways of knowing, my relationship with others, etc. So I borrow from the Nasa Paez indigenous people from Colombia, which happens to be the background from my mother and my grandmother and my grandparents as well. And in this cosmovision, I learned about the ways of seeing, feeling, listening, interpreting, but also monitoring the signs of the land and the community and the people that I work with, including those perceptions of risks and challenges, etc., and how we all want to work together towards trying to solve those challenges. And as an entry point of my pedagogical and research work, I borrow from that heritage from Latin America, from Colombia, right? And El Buen Vivir on one hand represents a respectful point of view for ethical human coexistence in diversity as an opportunity against systemic violence. El Buen Vivir construct as a system of knowledge based on the communion of humans and nature and the necessary interrelation of beings, knowledges, actions, and existence. On the other hand, sentipensante as a concept merges reason and emotion, sentir in Spanish, which means to sense or feel, and pensar, which means to think, mainly refers to a person who combines heart and mind to reveal truth in constant search of balance. Now that I have shared these two onto-epistemological concepts as points of entry for my work, I also want to mention that in my attempt for decolonization, I need to look at the South as a source for knowledge and how to go about dismantling the hierarchies in knowledge production and knowledge mobilization. And as such, I borrow from Boaventura de Sousa Santos, the epistemologies of the South, which have been a result of resistance and alternative politics in the global South. So from a decolonial perspective, the problem of these paradigms or ideologies of binary must be deconstructed by using non-Western ideologies, but those that were born from the struggle. And the epistemologies of the South, which I am going to tell you four key elements that Boaventura de Sousa Santos brought a while ago. So number one, the epistemologies of the South must help us understand the developing of a worldview that is in line with views from the global South, and also challenge those dominant and hegemonic Western or Eurocentric epistemologies. For Boaventura de Sousa Santos have been saying for a while that the Western epistemologies or ideas or ideologies have annihilated those ones in the South, and he calls this epistemicide. Number two, the idea of demanding a profound change in the ways knowledge is produced and validated. Boaventura de Sousa Santos keeps telling us and sending us the message and inviting us to value the knowledge that is produced in the South with indigenous people, Afro-Latino Americans, campesinos, people from the working class, etc. All of these are knowledges that should be produced and validated by anybody on the planet. Number three, creating alternatives that accounts for a plurality of knowledges and cultures. And number four, looking for sustainable, diverse knowledges, in which he calls the ecology of knowledges. So in other words, we have all these types of knowledges, that shouldn't be seen as a binary pyramidal entity, but more like work together, learn together from each other, support each other in an ecological way. So, in order to understand more this from the field perspective and especially from my field of language education, well, I conducted an ethnographic study back home in Colombia. And many of you know that Colombia has suffered more than 5 decades of violence perpetrated by various sectors, the guerrillas, the narco traffics, the paramilitary, the Colombian army, and some other sectors as well. So unfortunately, this violence has permeated the Colombian classroom, and youth has faced more violence in the schools than ever before. Although a peace agreement has been signed, social injustice is still prevalent in the country to this date. So I conducted this study in Bogota, the capital of Colombia, and in one of the most marginalized neighborhoods located in the southwest part of the city, as you can see depicted by the circle. El Barrio Southwest High School is the pseudonym name that I gave to this high school where I work. It's a secular mega school for almost 5,000 students in 3 different shifts: the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. And there is a diversity of students that come from a very low socioeconomical background, and also the children from Afro-Colombians, indigenous people, campesinos, and most recently from immigrants of Venezuela and other places, because there is a lot of displacement and internal and external immigration as well. So you can imagine a lot is going on in this school. So a concept that I have used is called SJPVC, which stands for Social Justice and Peace Building Curriculum. So in order to understand the lived experiences of my participant in relation to this concept of SJPVC, Social Justice and Peace Building Curriculum, I set out these questions. The overarching question: how is a unified social justice and peace building approach to teaching envisioned and enacted experience by English teachers and their students in a Colombian public school? And the sub-questions: what are the social, emotional, and academic processes of SJPVC implementation as described by English teachers and students? What are teachers and students' perspectives and experiences of SJPVC? What pedagogical and research implications flow or emerge from SJPVC? Now that I have deployed my concepts and my stance and my questions, I would like to bring your attention towards my decision to choose 2 specific methodologies. Critical ethnography and case study really help me understand the daily lives of real people from multiple sources and perspectives, and at the same time to critically understand and try to transform the power dynamics as participants engage in different English activities in the classroom and outside the classroom as well. So the participants of my study were 3 English teachers: Camello, Hadassa, and Sol, and these are pseudonyms, and their students, although I observed a few classes in grades 6, 8, and 9 for a little bit of the context. I focused my attention on grades 10 and 11, and I also spent the majority of time in Sol's class first, then a few in Hadassa's class, and a few observations in Camello's class as well. The methodology that I used, no, or the methods that I used to gather the data, was 52 classroom observations, 3 individual teacher interviews, 2 focus group with teachers in the form of comidas. I cooked for them, then we went to restaurants as well, to have chats about the work they're doing. 3 focus group with the students in the form of charlas, and charlas means informal conversations with the students, as this provide some kind of trust with the students. They felt more comfortable to share information with me in this kind of informal charlas. I also analyzed different documents such as Colombia Bilingual Policy Document, Colombian Curricular Guidelines for the Teaching of English, 2 series of books for the teaching of English, grades 6 to 11, 26 selected student notebooks, one teacher notebook, different artifacts as well, such as cultural productions, painting, posters, videos, etc. So imagine all of this diversity of different instruments that I use to collect the data. Now that I have briefly painted a picture of the context and my participants, I would like to present how I did the analysis. Well, I use a continuous process of content analysis in which I was looking for specific and common themes while continuously coding for particular patterns. And also, since the very beginning of the research, I constantly use a grounded theory approach in which, based on those emerging patterns and themes, I theorize through an ongoing and continuous hierarchization of patterns that I was putting on in Vivo 11. And as you can see, there are certain patterns coming in, and I was the one who decided what were the most salient patterns and themes out of the data that I collected. What I will show you represent the theorizations based on the multiple layers of data analysis around the main themes that connect to the overarching research question and the corresponding sub-questions. So I learned so many things during the research process, but what I will share today is just one fraction related to the pedagogical approach enacted in this particular context. And what I learned was about this particular pedagogical approach to teach English. And I call it pedagogía viva, ser, pertenecer, llegar a ser, and in English, living pedagogy, being, belonging, and becoming. So imagine that a verb ending in ing or ing is either a present participle or a gerund in the English language. It means the individual at the present moment, but also a perception of movement or a situation in constant action. So being refers to that person, the teacher, a student, you who are watching this video, who is in constant transformation and continuous change, a person who puts humanity at the heart of the actions. So being refers to a person who is in that constant transformation and putting humanity at the heart is this person that does it with action. And here is one interview excerpt from Saul, who speaks about what it means to be a teacher. And Saul, the teacher, says, a teacher who is human and feels humanity is already an excellent teacher because he or she is already connected. And when you connect humanity, you win 90% of learning. This idea of belonging refers not only to an affinity for a place, but also longing, a yearning desire to participate in changes that affect the communities positively. Hadassah's class is a good example of how belonging is present. In her project, she asks her students how they imagine their future selves and their purpose with their community. In this photograph, we see how a student depicts her connection with community and what she likes it to be. So let's see. So the student says, I would like that with respect to the community, everything would be respectful in spite of the differences and to be able to resolve them by talking. So as you can see, is this idea of how she wants to make an impact on the community. And through the research project, there was always this connection. How can I support my community? El barrio, my friends, my relatives, my family, everybody in the community. How can I support my community? Now, we can see how belonging refers to how their life connection with that community made the students aware of the problems and look for possible solutions. Here, Alicia, one of the students, replies to a question related to how the English class has impacted her learning. And she says, when we discuss topics such as my favorite community, I think it helped us to look at our reality, the one we live today, and how I can change that reality as I grow up. Now, the third construct, becoming, refers to who we are and who we want to be in the future. It is about the ever-evolving human person looking at a better personal and social future for all. So in these two excerpts that I'm showing you today, we can see how Saul, as a teacher, and Horacio, as a student, see that future, right? So Saul says, with this pedagogy, we have a goal for life. Make a positive impact on the students' lives. More than theory and academic content, it is the impact now and on the long term. And Horacio says, well, I have noticed how the teacher always gives us recommendations for the future. We talk about fair trade, for example, and how this is going to affect ethically our future. So in a sense, this idea of becoming attempts to move the individual, the person, from a state of passivity to one that is framed by agency and transformation, activism, etc., for the future. Teachers, pedagogists look towards that positive outcome. Despite the challenges that come part and parcel with violent environments the students find themselves in, teachers attempted to create the conditions for transformation, not necessarily with an immediate result, but with the hopes towards a more sustainable future in a modern, moderate state pace. And this is done by looking at how we can live well with each other on a long term in something that I call slow buen vivir. So, slow buen vivir, or SBV, refers to the teacher's activities, projects, and tasks that don't necessarily mean to make an immediate change today, but their actions are on an ongoing basis, and like I said, not an immediate impact, but with the hopes that this affects peoples and communities on the long term. And I call this idea slow buen vivir because the idea or the purpose is to live well with each other in harmony. And that's what el buen vivir is. But slow means that no impact today or tomorrow, but more on a long basis, long-term basis. Now that I have shown you these concepts and the conceptual work in tandem, but specifically I will explain how we all of this comes together as a model that I am proposing. So I could have created a traditional model based on my work with arrows or circles around, but I decided to create it in a different way. So as you can see here, we have emotion on one side, reason on the other. We have the concepts of being, belonging and becoming, and sente pensante, slow buen vivir, and the colonial praxis going back and forth, flowing from right to left, etc. I could have created that, right? But I decided to create the image of a living being or a living model embedded and embodied on a person, an individual who is, or maybe a teacher, a researcher, or any of you who are watching this video. So imagine this idea is embodied in an individual that harbors the concepts that I told you earlier and other concepts within a living model that I call onto-epistemological oneness for teaching and research. So it's an anti-colonial attempt to create a framework represented in a living being and their relationship with others. As you can see, there is this person that we don't know necessarily who this person is, but it's a person who is in relation with other beings like the universe, the cosmos, animals, nature, water, etc. So it's a subject who holds a slow buen vivir in one hand and a decolonial praxis on the other hand. And imagine that decolonial praxis, as the teachers and the students do it, how do you do and challenge things from a practical point of view to make changes? And the students and the teachers not only learn English for the sake of learning English, but they created different activities to make changes, like how to address issues of drug addiction, teenage pregnancy, homelessness, unemployment, etc. So that is what I'm talking about, the decolonial praxis. So addressing those issues, looking at how I want to make changes tangible, right? So this subject represents the concept of sentipensante, balancing emotion, as you can see, and reason, embodying a cosmovision situated in a diverse, dynamic, and ever-changing historical time and social space. So this proposed framework embodies an approach to pedagogy and research that is fundamentally rooted in what I mentioned earlier: being, belonging, and becoming. Their connections to themselves, the community, el barrio, the school, the city, the country, others, the planet, and their future possibilities. The subject characterized by this framework urges actions to seek mutual benefits to live beyond Western conceptualizations of development towards a symbiosis of social justice and peace building, in which we do research and teach beyond humans. And not also humans, but also non humans as well. So, what does all of this mean in practical terms? So, coming together, imagine what I propose. Well, I argue that an onto-epistemological model of oneness might help us understanding on centering the work. So imagine that we got all of this together, and let's think about centering the work in human relations, centering the work in our communities, el barrio, etc., centering the work in meaningful projects, classroom projects, or research projects that are in line with those communities and those human relationships. And those projects need and must be social justice oriented with the lens of the colonial praxis. And again, the colonial praxis is this idea of action oriented tasks or projects that make changes in the community or attempt to make those changes instead of just learning content, learning to do projects that actually help their communities. So, in other words, several academics and researchers have said for a while that we are currently in the process of a paradigm shift from a binary one, similar to the one in the pyramid that I have, one, those who are at the top and those who are at the bottom, and there is always this dichotomical way, moving from that to a pluriversal paradigm in which we all support each other in solidarity so we can live well with each other, in which ideas of el buen vivir and sentipensante and other ideas, such as the colonial praxis as well, can live well with each other in an ecosystem of support and help. And Escobar calls it a pluriversal politics. So now that I have shown you this model and this possible implication, we must wonder what it means for the future of research and how we mobilize knowledge. Well, throughout my research journey, I learned that research cannot be objective. It is important to acknowledge the human emotions that emerge from participation in research. So in the end, envisioning such a model yielded three main implications. Number one, for pedagogy, the inclusive practices enacted by the teacher participants in the study that I just mentioned resonate with similar suggestions by the Colombian English teaching community and other researchers who have recommended the need for language teachers to adopt pedagogical practices that make safe spaces for students to learn about each other, right? To learn about each other languages and cultures while working towards social justice. And this happens to any language education program, second language, ESL, TESOL, foreign languages, world languages, any type of language education. Now, number two, for language policy and planning, in a country in which violence permeates education, it is paramount that linguistic policies are aligned to the needs of the most marginalized populations. So it is suggested that in Colombia, language policy and planning takes place at the many levels and involves numerous stakeholders, such as teachers making classroom decisions for what languages are used for instruction, school administrators determining what is priority in the school, and the national government creating particular language policies and flexible curriculum that allows the learning of as many languages as possible, and not only English, but also revitalizing the indigenous languages of different communities. And third, research that is for, by, and with the community, in which there is no more this duality of the observant and the observer, but more like collaborators. That is to say, researchers must respond to the needs of the communities in an attempt to solve problems with real actions. In other words, encouraging more action research, participatory action research, ethnographies from on the ground, with more participation and collaboration from everybody in the community in order to debinarize the roles. So finally, the research, or this research, and the way I am now disseminating today, is only one slice of the entire research. And in my attempt to disseminate knowledge in a different way, so I created this video for everybody to see it, and in a sense propose a model, but also let others understand what I'm doing with all of this. So as such, I suggest research must be disseminated in alternative forms to reach broader audiences, and specifically those who cannot access to journals with high paid subscription costs. I advocate for the use of other media as equal and legitimate forms of knowledge mobilization. Various researchers have already begun to explore the use of social media, research summaries, and briefs translated into different languages, podcasts, and other audiovisual media. My role as a researcher is to ensure the findings of this research reach wide range of communities through multiple means like these ones. Thank you so much for watching. Here we have some of the key references. Thanks for listening. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, comments. If you like the content of this video, feel free to click like, subscribe, and share with others, as well as make sure to use APA edition, 7th edition for citations of video dissemination. The content of this video dissemination has been peer reviewed by the thesis committee and other peers as well. So I thank you once again for watching this video, and I welcome any comments or suggestions on the proposed model. Thank you so much.